She doesn't cry when you leave. She doesn't break down the door or beg you to stay. She doesn't even call. But what if I told you that your absence isn't met with silence? It's met with chaos she's too proud to show you. You've been told women are emotional, but what no one told you is that their strongest emotion is control. And when a man pulls back, not chasing, not reacting, not explaining himself, he's breaking her grip on that control. And that's where the real story begins. That's when her feelings start, not when you're with her, but when you're gone. Think about the last time you went quiet on someone, not because you were angry, not because you were hurt, but because you were done explaining your worth. What happened next? She posted more. She dressed differently. She became louder, more visible, suddenly engaged with guys she never cared for. That wasn't confidence. That was desperation wrapped in defiance. And if you've ever felt crazy for stepping away from a woman and still feeling like she was trying to pull you back in, you're not crazy. You were valuable. Because truth is, when a man steps back with purpose, the game flips. Not just in dating, but in life. And if you're still chasing, if you're still explaining, begging, pleasing, this video is your wake-up call. Before we dive in, drop a comment below. My presence is power. If those words hit something deep, stay with me. This will be the most important video you've watched this year. You were raised to believe that your value comes from what you do for others. That showing up, being available, giving more, makes you a good man, a real man. And in many ways that's true, but in modern relationships, it's the quickest way to lose yourself. Because the truth is, most men today are stuck in relationships where they're doing everything, yet feeling like they're nothing. Have you felt that? You give your time, your attention, your effort, and all you get back is confusion, distance, sometimes even disrespect. But here's what no one told you. Your energy, your attention, it's the most powerful currency you have. And every time you spend it without knowing your worth, you make yourself cheaper in her eyes. It's not about being cold. It's not about games. It's about understanding your value and protecting it with the discipline of a man who knows himself. That's why we're here, because now, for the first time, I've made something available that will shift everything for you. It's called the Stoic Relationship Blueprint, and it's the best, most transformative ebook ever created for men navigating the chaos of modern dating. It's built from the ground up with real-world examples, proven psychological truths, and timeless Stoic principles. It gives you the tools to reclaim your identity, the frameworks to build emotional control, and the exact strategies to stop being taken for granted by women who don't understand your value. It shows you how to become the man who doesn't get ghosted, doesn't get manipulated, and doesn't chase. It shows you how to become unshakable. It's finally public, but it won't stay that way. This is rare knowledge, high-level strategy for men who are ready to live differently. So when this video ends, don't wait. Get it while it's still available. Because I'll say this, once you apply what's inside, you'll never beg for her attention again. She'll feel your absence like a storm she didn't prepare for. Now, let's talk about what really happens when you leave, and why your absence speaks louder than anything you could ever say. Number 1, your distance confuses her. She didn't see it coming, not from you, not the one who always checked in, who always made time, who responded quickly, who showed care without being asked, who stayed patient when she acted cold, who tolerated the small rejections because you thought it was strength to endure instead of stepping back. Not the man who was emotionally available in a world where women are encouraged to be emotionally elusive. And so when you shifted, when you didn't respond the way you used to, when the predictable you suddenly stopped being predictable, Her entire understanding of the dynamic cracked at its foundation, not because she loved you, but because she built a world where she expected you to orbit around her emotions, and when that orbit stopped, she was left floating, weightless, uncertain of her place. Because the truth is, she never loved the real you. She loved the power she held when she could count on you to respond the same way every time, with care, with validation, with presence. And now you've disrupted that pattern. Now you've become a variable in an equation she thought she had solved. And that confusion doesn't look like tears. It looks like sudden activity online. It looks like new stories. It looks like posts crafted to feel independent, but soaked in fear. It looks like her being seen in places she never cared about before, hoping mutual friends report back to you because she doesn't know how to ask directly. Because asking would mean admitting that she's confused, and women would rather appear unbothered than vulnerable. They'll perform confidence to cover the panic of losing control. And the truth that cuts deeper than any lie is that women don't mourn your departure. They mourn the certainty that came with your attention, because when a man pulls back with calm and purpose, without argument or announcement, he becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is the one thing they cannot handle because it disrupts the script. It flips the dynamic. It makes her the one waiting, the one overthinking, the one refreshing. And the reason it cuts so deep is because she knows deep down, even if she won't say it out loud, that she didn't handle you with the grace you deserved. She knows you showed up and she played games. She knows you gave her a man most women beg for, and she responded with hot and cold tests, passive aggression, silence as punishment, fake independence, inflated ego disguised as standards. And now you've stopped performing, you've stopped explaining, you've stopped chasing. And without realizing it, she feels something she hasn't felt in a long time. Insecurity, the thing she's used to making men feel. And in that moment, her confidence isn't real anymore. It's a costume she wears when the camera is on, when the group chat is active, when the attention is flowing. But when it's 11:47 p.m. and the screen is dark and the room is quiet and no messages have come in from you, she starts wondering if she miscalculated, if maybe she pushed a little too far this time, if maybe the man she thought would always be there finally decided he was done proving his worth to someone who didn't recognize it. And that thought, it terrifies her, because it means for once she wasn't in control. She wasn't the one walking away. She was the one left behind, not dramatically, not emotionally, but surgically, clean. And that's what unsettles her most. Your absence wasn't a tantrum, it was a decision, and now she's replaying every word she said, every moment she dismissed your effort, every time she pretended not to care. Not because she's in love, but because she's confused about why a man who gave so much is now giving nothing. And that confusion is the seed that will either grow into obsession or regret, depending on how you move next. And this is the moment where most men fail. They peek, they reach out, they explain, they throw away all the power they've gained because they think her confusion is cruelty. But it's not. It's proof that your presence meant more than she admitted. And now your distance is revealing it louder than your words ever did. And the man who stays grounded, who doesn't flinch, who keeps building while she spirals, becomes something rare, something terrifying, something she never prepared for. A man she couldn't break, couldn't predict, couldn't keep on standby. And now she's stuck wondering, rereading, regretting, questioning. And if you stay focused, you become unforgettable, not because you chased, but because you didn't. Not because you convinced her, but because you didn't try. Not because you proved your worth to her, but because you finally realized it for yourself. Number 2. Her ego feels the first hit. She doesn't feel heartbreak first. She feels insulted, because the moment you stop orbiting her world, the moment you remove yourself from the routine she never appreciated but always relied on, The first blow isn't emotional. It's ego, it's identity. It's the internal shriek of a woman who built her confidence on the foundation of your predictable affection. And now that you've pulled back, not with threats or ultimatums, but with a chilling clarity that shows you no longer need to be seen to know your worth, she panics. Not outwardly, not in ways that expose her pride, but internally, quietly, beneath the surface of her curated life, where the emptiness starts growing in the places your validation used to fill, and her pride is screaming questions she can't ask out loud, like why didn't he try harder? Why did he just let go? Why is he so calm while I feel like I'm losing something I didn't even realize I depended on? And that realization bruises her ego more than any insult ever could, because in her world, men chase, men apologize, men crawl back. And when you don't, when you stay still and focused, her sense of control begins to disintegrate. And that's what really shakes her. Not the loss of connection, but the loss of command. Because for so long she believed your presence was a guarantee, and now that it's not, she doesn't know how to make sense of the imbalance, so she starts acting out. Not always toward you. Sometimes toward the next man, sometimes toward herself, sometimes toward her online audience, who now sees a surge of motivational quotes and suddenly curated images of joy, strength, and independence. But none of it is real, because if it were, she wouldn't be stalking your stories with an account you don't recognize, wouldn't be casually mentioning your name in conversations, hoping someone will tell her you still care, wouldn't be comparing your calm to the chaos every other man brings into her life. And most of all, she wouldn't be hoping to hear that you're struggling without her, because if her ego were truly intact, she wouldn't need proof that your world is crumbling without her presence. But she does, and that need eats away at her until it becomes undeniable. And the longer you remain unshaken, the more that bruised ego starts searching for ways to explain your detachment. Maybe he never really cared, maybe he found someone else, maybe he's broken. But none of those stories satisfy her, because deep down she knows the truth. You grew, you awakened, you realized that her attention was never love, and her games were never tests of loyalty. They were mechanisms of control, and the moment you stepped outside of that control, the illusion shattered, and now she's left standing in the ruins of her own inflated self-worth, confused by the echo of your absence, haunted by the memory of someone who didn't just leave, but who did it with a peace that she'll never forget. And this is the deepest cut of all, because her ego can survive anger. It can survive begging. It can even survive goodbye. But it cannot survive your indifference, your stillness, your ability to walk away without proving her right or wrong, because that means she never really had you. And the illusion of control was just that, an illusion, one you no longer dance for, and now she's forced to sit with the raw truth that you, the man she assumed would always chase, has evolved into something far more dangerous to her sense of power. A man who no longer needs her validation to define himself. Number 3, she creates drama to lure you back. It begins the moment she realizes her usual tools have failed. The moment she notices that the things that once triggered a response from you now echo into nothingness, that the old tricks, the unread message, the flirty post, the indirect jab, no longer pull you back like they used to, and that terrifies her because it exposes something she never wanted to admit, that she's lost influence over a man who once responded with urgency, and so she does what countless women do when their subtle manipulations stop working. She escalates, not from love, not from pain, but from wounded pride and desperate need to regain control over a situation she once dictated. And so the drama begins, not because she's hurt, but because she's used to being able to spark emotion in others at will, used to being the one who pushes buttons and watches men unravel themselves in a frantic attempt to regain her affection. And now that you've stopped engaging, Now that you don't explain yourself, don't apologize, don't break at her accusations. She moves from confusion into calculated emotional warfare, turning minor disagreements into battlegrounds, creating problems out of peace, introducing chaos where there was calm, all in the hopes that you'll finally react, that you'll break the restraint, that you'll lash out or lean in or give her something, anything, to prove that you still care. And this isn't affection. It's a test, not of love, but of control. And the more grounded you remain, the more furious she becomes, because she realizes the truth she's been trying to avoid. That her grip is gone, and the man who used to spin for her attention now stands still. And so she'll start calling you things you never were, labeling your clarity as cruelty, your restraint as abandonment, your growth as betrayal. And she'll do it in ways that make her look like the victim, weaving stories for friends, painting herself as the one who was misunderstood, all while secretly hoping you're watching, hoping you'll feel cornered into defending yourself, because that's what she needs, to pull you back into a place where your energy is spent justifying your peace, where your calm must be explained and your distance must be defended. And if you take the bait, if you engage, if you try to reason or fight or make her see things differently, you've already lost, not because you're wrong, but because the moment you return to defend yourself against her chaos, she knows she can still pull you out of your frame, and that knowledge becomes her fuel, her fire, her reassurance that she's still in control. But when you don't take the bait, when you don't reply to the accusations, when you don't explain why you didn't respond to the story or react to the trap, something begins to unravel in her because the drama has nowhere to land. The chaos collapses in on itself, and she realizes that the man who doesn't engage is no longer bound by her emotional puppeteering, and that's the moment her power turns into panic, because she can't provoke a man who sees through the game and refuses to play. And when you remain still, not cold but resolved, not detached but self-respecting, her only weapon, your reaction, vanishes, and in its place she's left holding a story she can't manipulate, a narrative she can't spin, because it's hard to tell the world you were mistreated by a man who never raised his voice, who never retaliated, who simply walked with dignity and never looked back. And that quiet, devastating clarity becomes her unraveling, because the man who doesn't fight back isn't weak. He's done. Number 4, she starts reverse engineering you. When you were there, when you were present, when you showed up without hesitation and poured yourself into someone who mistook your devotion for dependence, she never thought twice about who you were beneath the surface, because in her mind you were predictable, available, comfortably familiar, someone who didn't need decoding because you revealed everything without being asked, and that made you safe, but not valuable in her eyes, because familiarity breeds contempt in the hearts of those who have never had to earn love. And so she never paused to really understand you, never sat down with herself and thought about your core, your edge, your silence when things got tense, your resilience when things didn't go her way. But now that you've stepped away, not with spite but with the clean break of a man who finally remembered who he is, she's left staring at the space you used to fill and trying to piece together the version of you she never bothered to fully see, because the stillness left behind speaks louder than all your words ever did. And so she starts reverse engineering everything, you, your moods, your patterns, your messages, your eyes when you were disappointed, the way you laughed when you still trusted her, the way you looked at her the last time you really looked. And it becomes an obsession, not out of love but necessity, because understanding you now becomes the only way to make sense of the growing discomfort inside her, the way her new connections feel shallow, the way every man she meets seems to lack something she can't describe but feels deeply. And what she's really chasing isn't reconciliation, it's understanding, because if she can just decode what made you different, maybe she can find that again, maybe she can replicate it, maybe she can control it next time. But what she's beginning to realize, slowly and painfully, is that you were never predictable. You were just patient, and now that you're gone, she sees the weight of what she lost. Not because she misses the attention, but because she misses the foundation you brought into her chaotic world. The calm she never appreciated until it was replaced by noise. And now she's deep in memory, scrolling through old messages, trying to figure out where things shifted, which moment you started pulling back, which word she spoke that made your eyes change. And the further she digs, the more frustrated she becomes, because she can't find the moment. You didn't leave with warning, you left with growth. And that's what she can't figure out. That's what her pride won't let her admit. That you evolved while she stood still, and now she's chasing ghosts, trying to reverse engineer a man who no longer exists in the version she once controlled. And it eats at her, this realization, this truth that you were always becoming something greater, even while she was treating you like something common. And now she's stuck with the memory of a man who outgrew her expectations and left her with only questions she's too afraid to answer. Because the more she reflects, the clearer it becomes. She didn't lose you when you walked away. She lost you when she stopped appreciating the way you stayed. Number 5. The void amplifies your value. She never thought your absence would weigh this much. Never imagined that removing your voice, your presence, your calm stability from her life would cause the entire structure of her emotional reality to start trembling, because while she was scrolling through her options, entertaining the kind of attention that looks good in public but feels empty in private, she didn't understand that what she had with you was irreplaceable. Not because you were perfect, not because you gave her flowers or made grand gestures, but because when you were in her life, she felt grounded even if she didn't realize it. And now that you're not there, now that you're no longer offering your perspective, your discipline, your strength, in moments when she felt like unraveling, she's starting to see what she had, not in comparison to who you were, but in comparison to what she's left with. Shallow conversations with men who say all the right things, but stand for nothing. Men who bend their values to please her mood swings. Men who flood her with attention, but crumble under her slightest disapproval. And the more she tries to connect with these new faces, the more she begins to feel a strange emptiness inside her. A quiet dissatisfaction that follows her into every conversation, because they don't challenge her. They don't ground her. They don't ask her to rise above her chaos. They just orbit around it. And now, with every failed connection, your value grows in her mind, not because you're trying to prove anything, not because you're still around trying to get her back, but because you've removed yourself completely, and in your absence, she's now confronted with the truth. That not all attention is equal, that not every man brings peace, and that your discipline, your steadiness, your focus weren't just traits. They were the anchor to her drifting emotions, and now that anchor is gone, she's adrift in a sea of noise, trying to find a voice that hits as deeply as yours did, trying to find energy that makes her feel safe and elevated at the same time. And she can't, because the reality is, what you gave her wasn't generic, it wasn't common. It was the presence of a man who built himself from the ground up, who didn't chase to be liked but led from conviction, who didn't react to her games but moved from principles. And now, every time she talks to someone new, she feels the gap more clearly, not because they're bad men, but because they lack the very thing she once took for granted in you: depth, control, direction. And this isn't about nostalgia or emotional weakness. It's about reality catching up to her choices. And in that reality, your absence becomes louder than any argument you could have made, your non-response more impactful than any apology you could have given, because she realizes now that the men flooding her inbox don't mean what they say, don't stand where they claim to stand, don't have the kind of internal backbone that made you unforgettable. And that realization cuts deeper than anything you could have said when she started pushing you away, because the void you left wasn't filled by another person. It became a mirror to everything she didn't appreciate when she had the chance. And now, you're no longer just the man who left. You're the man who set the standard. The man she'll measure others against and never quite replicate, because what you offered came from a place she didn't understand when she had it. Real self-respect. And that kind of energy can't be copied, faked, or replaced. Number 6. Her mind rewrites the past. It starts subtly, in quiet moments when she's alone, when the noise of daily life fades and she's left with her memories, and that's when it begins. Her mind starts bending reality, not because she's lying to herself, but because the truth is too heavy to carry. And it's easier to rewrite history than to admit she walked away from a man who truly stood in his own power. Because when you were around, she dissected everything you did, judged your stillness, criticized your intensity, picked apart the way you spoke, called you too focused, too distant, too committed to your path. And yet now, in hindsight, all those things she once framed as flaws start to look different, now that she's talking to men who don't think past Friday, who agree with everything she says because they don't have the courage to challenge her, who think being a man is about being soft and agreeable instead of being strong and principled, and suddenly your distance looks like direction, your quiet like composure, your stubbornness like discipline, and as the memory of you sharpens, her understanding of what she had shifts. And this is the mental trap she now lives in, trying to reconcile the version of you she thought she could control with the version of you she now knows she never really understood, because she didn't lose you when you left. She lost you when she failed to recognize the depth of what you offered while it was still in her life. And now her memory scrambles to fix that narrative, to soften her guilt, to make sense of how she let something so rare slip away without realizing it. So she starts reconstructing old moments, rewriting scenes in her mind where she responds with more grace, where she apologizes when you needed support, where she doesn't escalate arguments to feed her ego. And these aren't just idle thoughts. They're her attempt to rewrite the end of a story that ended not because you weren't good enough, but because she didn't know how to handle a man who refused to be anything less than who he really was. And as those rewritten moments loop in her mind, they begin to haunt her, because she can't go back, can't fix it, can't re-earn the space she once held with ease. And the more she tries to move on, the more that past comes back with weight she didn't feel when she first made the decision to let you go, because the consequences have finally caught up with her, not just emotionally, but existentially. And now she walks through life with a filter over every connection, every interaction, every date, subconsciously asking if this man has even half the strength you carried so naturally. And when the answer is always no, she doubles back in her mind, wishing, regretting, aching, not because she wants you back in the same way, but because she wants to undo the version of herself that couldn't recognize you when you were in front of her. And that's the real heartbreak. Not losing a man, but losing access to the better version of herself that only existed when she was being called higher by someone who didn't accept the bare minimum, who didn't reward drama with attention, who didn't bend for convenience. And now she rewrites the past, not to fix you, but to forgive herself. Because deep down she knows she was never ready for the kind of love that didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't chase, but simply walked away when it was no longer being honored. Number 7. She watches in silence. She pretends she doesn't care, acts like you're just another name she once entertained, like she's too busy to notice your absence or wonder where you've gone. But deep down, behind the carefully controlled expressions, behind the half-laughs and curated posts, she's watching, closer than ever, not because she misses you in the way she'll ever admit, but because your stillness unnerves her. Your absence lingers longer than your presence ever did. And what terrifies her more than losing you is realizing that your life didn't collapse without her, that the man she thought needed her validation to breathe is now moving through life with more certainty, more clarity, more self-respect than he ever showed when she had his attention, and that observation alone unsettles the very foundation of her self-image, because for so long she believed she was the prize, the gravitational force around which your entire emotional universe revolved, and now she sees you doing what she never thought you would, living without waiting for her to notice, and that stings in ways no rejection ever could. So she watches, obsessively, compulsively, from a distance, from shadow accounts, or through mutual friends, through old messages. She revisits not for comfort, but for answers. Because now she's not just trying to see what you're doing. She's trying to understand how you're doing it, how you've managed to detach with such completeness, with such focus, with such unapologetic freedom. And every update, every glimpse of you smiling, every time she hears your name mentioned without pain or bitterness, she feels the grip she once had slipping further from her reach. And in that distance, something begins to shift in her. Not remorse, not love, but discomfort. The kind that creeps in when you realize you underestimated someone who's no longer trying to prove you wrong. And this is what she can't bear. The fact that you no longer need to be seen, that you've stopped reacting to her presence, and even worse, that you might actually be happier without her. And though she won't reach out, won't admit it, won't dare say the words, every time she checks your profile, every time she hears your name, every time she imagines who you might be speaking to now, a part of her fractures. Because watching isn't about curiosity anymore. It's about loss. It's about grappling with the painful realization that while she was busy feeding her ego, you were building a better version of yourself, one that doesn't include her. And that kind of growth is hard to witness when it's happening in someone you thought would always wait, always hope, always want another chance. And so she watches, because if she doesn't, she has to accept that she no longer holds any place in your mind, and that truth, unspoken and unconfirmed, is more unbearable than any message left unread. And so she continues the quiet surveillance, holding on to the only connection she has left, the ability to see you even if you never see her again. Number 8. She questions her decision. At first, she was proud of herself, convinced she'd made the right call, convinced that walking away or letting go was strength, that not chasing after you was proof of her worth, that withholding affection was power. And in the beginning, it felt good, like control, like independence, like liberation. But time has a way of peeling back the surface and forcing us to sit with what's underneath. And now, in the quiet moments when no one's around to validate her strength, when the buzz of temporary attention has worn off and the reality of solitude settles in, that pride begins to crack, and she starts to think back, not to the fights or the misunderstandings, but to the moments you showed up when no one else did, to the way you stood there, silent and grounded when she was spinning out, to the calmness in your voice when she was irrational, to the loyalty you gave without needing a reason. And slowly, almost painfully, those memories start to feel heavier, not because they hurt, but because they're real. And now she finds herself haunted not by your presence, but by the echo of everything you didn't say when you left, by the dignity of your exit, by the restraint you showed in not fighting for someone who never appreciated the way you stayed. And that's when the questioning begins, not just of you, but of herself, of the way she handled things, of the version of her that pushed you away while expecting you to always return. And now she wonders what would have happened if she'd chosen softness over stubbornness, grace over control, vulnerability over games. And those thoughts aren't fleeting. They linger, they grow, they take root in her mind, because she knows deep down she didn't lose you in one moment. She lost you slowly, day by day, word by word, action by action. And now, that realization doesn't come with drama. It comes with regret, quiet, gnawing, inescapable regret that clings to her in ways she can't admit out loud, because admitting it means facing the fact that she walked away from a man who was real in a world where most aren't. And that kind of mistake isn't easy to forgive, not because of what she lost, but because of what she gave up without ever fully understanding. And so she questions everything: the decisions she made, the pride she held onto, the friends who told her she could do better, the distractions she ran to that never felt quite right. And in that reflection, she sees the difference between validation and value, between attention and intention, between men who want her and men who guide her. And suddenly, what once felt like strength now feels like fear disguised as independence. And she realizes too late that she didn't let go because you weren't enough. She let go because she didn't know how to receive something that wasn't built on control. And now she lives with that choice every day, wondering if she'll ever find that level of presence again, knowing deep down she won't. Because what you gave was rare, what you built was real, and what you walked away from was a place where you were no longer honored. And the man who can walk away from that is the man she'll remember forever, not with hate, not with bitterness, but with the kind of ache that lives in the corners of a woman's heart long after the rest of the world forgets your name. If this hit you deep, if even one part of your soul whispered, "This was meant for me," then you already know what to do, because watching without action is just self-betrayal dressed as entertainment. And this isn't entertainment. This is a lifeline. This is the brutal truth most men die without hearing. And if you felt it, then you owe it to yourself to grab the Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men, the most unapologetic, powerful, and brutally clear guide ever created for men who are tired of being lied to, manipulated, discarded, and overlooked. And it's linked right now in the comments below, not for everyone, but for those who are ready to stop bleeding in silence and start living with clarity, because one decision right now can save you years of regret, confusion, and chasing women who never deserved your time in the first place. So if you're that man, if this message cut through the noise and spoke to your core, then comment below, the Stoic Blueprint, like this video, and subscribe right now so more men can wake up before it's too late. Because every man deserves to hear this truth before he gives his soul to a woman who was never going to love him.